Yeah, McDougall, I have McArdle disease. I'm not a McArdle disease expert, but I'm a patient and I'm a student of the disease. I'm 81 years old and I retired after spending most of my life as a retail pharmacist, standing on my feet all day. That was usually 8-hour shifts, but many times it was up to 13 hours a day with only two 15-minute breaks when I could sit down. I'll explain later why I think I was able to do that when many with our disease would find it impossible. But I was asked to talk about how an exercise program has affected my McArdle disease symptoms. Do I look like someone who does what he's asked to? But I will, because I have a serious message, especially for newly diagnosed patients and the parents of newly diagnosed McArdle disease children. So, I retired gradually by cutting back the hours that I worked from 40 hours a week down to about 32 for a year and then 24 and then 16. And I cut back my shifts that I worked from 8 hours a day down to 4. And my McArdle symptoms were getting worse all the time. And I stopped walking to work and I drove there every day. So after retiring, my wife and I were considering selling the house that we had lived in for 40 years because I was having trouble going up the stairs to bed. I wasn't able to walk to the shopping center anymore. I had worked there for decades. And when DNA testing showed that I had McArdle disease, I said, uh-oh, that's what it was all about. So what am I going to do about it? I suspected that I had had McArdle disease since a doctor told me at age 34 that I appeared to have been born with some kind of congenital muscle disease. Since there was no cure and no treatment known at the time, and since nobody believed that there was anything wrong with me except that I lacked the will to get in shape like everyone else did, I had come to ignore that possibility. But once I was diagnosed, I was able to study what others had to say about the condition. I found stories that sounded like what I had dealt with all my life. And I found that there was research going on all the time that I thought there was nothing I could do about it. I found the AGSD in the UK, and I found Facebook McArdle group, and I learned techniques that Andrew Wakeland and others had described. I learned how to walk, and soon I was walking to the shopping center where I had worked for so long. I felt a bit healthier. I no longer had a problem with stairs. I attended the first of 2 McArdle conferences that I went to, put on by IMGSD, and I came home knowing that I could do even better. I walked to a nearby gym, met a personal trainer who had been working with seniors for 20 years. He was intrigued by the rare disease that he had never heard of, so I gave him links to IMGSD webpage and to an exercise program that had been developed in Spain by Dr. Alfredo and Santalla and his colleagues. He made me wait until he had read and understood this information before adapting a workout program for me. So I went to the gym 3 times a week for a few months until the owners there went broke and closed the business down. But by getting my arms and legs into second wind at the start of each session and going from one set of muscles to another with 5 minutes rests in between, I had had steady progress. My walks to the gym had been part of the project, but now I was able to extend my walks, mostly walking in the trails of Mount Douglas Park. Mount Douglas Park, Mount Douglas Park actually is named after Mount Douglas, and Mount Douglas is not a mountain. It's the hill that's visible over the roof of the house that I've lived in for the past 40 years. Its elevation is about the height of a 75-story building, 225 meters. On a good day, and there are lots of those here in Victoria, BC, Canada, I can walk from home to the park, climb a trail to the summit, and be home in about an hour and a half. More often I walk to the park and go to the other direction, down to the beach, and back home in about the same length of time. If I had been told when I moved into this house that I had to walk to the summit of Mount Doug, I would have asked for a backpack and sleeping bag, as I would have been sure it would take me more than a day. We do have snow days here, or other nasty weather conditions sometimes, and I prefer to stay home, so I use the rowing machine on those days. Sometimes I just row before going for a walk, and it doesn't always get my legs into second wind, but it seems to inspire me to get out and walk. I won't be trying out for the Olympics, and I won't be entering contests with the goal of winning. I've tried to enter contests to promote the awareness of my rare disease, but then along came pandemic. I don't compete physically with anyone, even other McArdle patients. My exercise program is strictly for my muscle maintenance. I walk, I even jog sometimes. I row. I have 2 10-pound weights that I lift 3 or 4 reps, occasionally 5, but never for more than 6 seconds. And over a period of a year or 2, I can see noticeable growth and improved function in my neck muscles too. I know there are many McArdle patients much younger than me who wish they could be as active as I am, but knowing we have a deficiency of one enzyme doesn't explain everything that each of us is dealing with. The value of exercise in the treatment of McArdle disease symptoms by otherwise healthy adults has been proven. I know that I was born with a lot of good luck. Being born in Charlottetown, PEI, Canada in 1939 was very good for me because the Second World War was spreading over Europe and most of the world. Not having anything more serious than McArdle disease was great, and it appears that I was pleased to find out that I was a boy in our male-dominant society. But there was that negative McArdle disease. So if I go through my life giving 1 minute for each year, I'll talk for an hour and 21 minutes. Nobody wants that, I'm sure. So, a condensed version. My father died when I was 2 years old, leaving my 30-year-old mother to raise 4 children, aged 6 months to 6 years, on an Army widow's pension. So we had little money. We all had jobs to do around the house, and when we were old enough, we had jobs to do to make money. We were not financially well off, but we were not allowed to dwell on that. Pictures from my childhood show the healthy, happy kid that everyone saw at the time. The shy kid who felt so physically inferior was hiding behind the smiles, and hiding behind a smart alecky attitude as well. We had no family car. We walked everywhere. Even to get down to the downtown, we'd walk half a mile to get to a streetcar stop. We walked farther than that when we went to school in the morning, back home for lunch, back to school, back home again. In summer, we would walk miles to one of Vancouver's beaches. Not from where I was born, no, that would be a lot of miles. When I was 5, we had moved across the country to Vancouver, BC. I grew up in Vancouver. I went to school. I worked after school delivering newspapers at 11, and at age 12, I was hired to deliver for a drugstore. I rode my bike uphill 2 miles to school, then spent 2 hours after school riding up and down the longest and steepest hills in South Vancouver. I had no idea at the time, but I was using second wind every day. At 16, I was able to join the Royal Canadian Air Force Reserve. Girls had to be 18 to join, but boys only 16. And it gave me an indoor job, which was fantastic. I was trained as a clerk typist, and that's not very physically demanding, as you would say. But to get home after work, I walked a few blocks to the Burrard Bridge, then walked all the way across the bridge to downtown to catch a bus that would take me home. And that was a challenge. I'm certainly not unique in being, as a McArdle patient, having had a successful career and what would be described by others as a normal life. I became a district supervisor for a drugstore chain, and I was married and had a child while in my 20s. I took time out and bought a 28-foot sailboat and cruised the sheltered waters between Vancouver Island and the mainland for 4 months with my wife and son. I volunteered with an NGO, it was CUSO, to help with Canada's foreign aid programs in the Caribbean. I had a lot of impressive sounding titles in St. Kitts. I did a survey of pharmacy services for the government of Antigua while I was there. My marriage at that time would make a pretty good multi-season Netflix series, but let's just say it crashed. So after returning to Canada, I managed pharmacies in Vancouver, then Kamloops, and finally returned to Victoria. My second marriage would make a pretty good chick flick, and the romance continues after 41 years. I believe that my physically active life as a child helped my body adapt to McArdle disease and allowed me to have the life that I chose. It allowed me to do the things I wanted to do. McArdle disease is something I have. It's not something that has controlled my life. That life has included sailing and getting my private pilot's license and trying new things all the time, even making a video like this one.